Call to order the study session for the City Council for the City of
Recording in
Colorado.
progress.
Thank you. So I'll start again. Study sessions for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado, for March 15th, 2021. Thank you for joining us. We have two items on our agenda tonight. We have our 2021 Colorado Legislative Update, and we have as a second item the delegation of private activity bonds cap to Foothills Regional Housing. And we've got visitors with us tonight. I'd like to see Representative Monica Duran on with us. Representative Duran, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you in a few minutes. And we have Megan Dollar with us from CML. Megan, thank you for being with us. We'll start our meeting tonight, as we do all of our meetings, with citizen comment on any agenda item. If you are joining us tonight by the Zoom format or on the telephone, welcome. We would like to invite you to comment on either one of our agenda items, and this is your opportunity to do so. If you would, when we get into the plan, if you would please raise your hand in the Zoom format, you'll be able to have 3 minutes to address the council on either of the items on our agenda. So I'm going to go to Ms. Scheck and see if anyone has raised their hand to speak tonight.
No, Mayor, I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, and if you're on the telephone, you may unmute yourself and ask to be recognized, and we will bring you into the meeting.
No callers tonight.
So we don't see anyone. Okay, I'll give it just a couple of more seconds. I don't want to cut anybody off. Sometimes it's hard to find the right button at the right time. That happens to me quite a bit. So, but nobody yet. Okay, well, we will close our citizens' right to speak, and we will go to our first item, which is the 2021 Colorado Legislative Update. Always a really interesting and informative piece of our first quarter agenda. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I will go to Mr. Goff. Do we have a presentation on this?
We do. I'll hand it over to Marianne Schilling first. And I don't know if Ms. Councilmember Urban also is our representative to CML, if he has anything he wants to say, but we'll let Marianne start. And want to thank Monica Duran and Jesse Dennelson for coming and Megan Dollar this evening. It's legislative session's been a little different this year. I think Megan and Monica can probably attest to that, but just because of COVID, it's hasn't been on the normal schedule. But we thought it was important to get in front of council with this session, as we do annually, and talk about any bills that you want to learn more about, and allow Monica and Jesse some time to talk about maybe bills that they're sponsoring. So Marianne, did you have any introductory remarks?
Sure, I can say a couple things. So this is our annual legislative update. This is important because it allows our legislators to let us know what their priorities are for each year. It also lets our city staff, let City Council know what the priorities are for them. And then of course we have Megan Dollar from CML, who is the Legislative Advocacy Manager, and she provides great insight for all of us. So tonight the agenda will be that we go through the legislative session preview for 2021. So we will have Senator Jesse Danielson, Representative Monica Duran providing an overview. Following that, we will go over the priority of legislative issues from CML, from City Council, and then finally from our department directors.
All right. Who's up next?
Marianne, we have Monica Duran.
We do, unless Councilmember Urban wanted to say anything.
Okay, Mr. Urban, any introduction?
Yeah, I would just point out the importance of CML here. You know, as much influence as we might have in the realm that Representative Duran provides, or the Senator Danielson provides, the Colorado Municipal League really gives us that guidance and that cover in those areas that we may not necessarily understand the risks or the influence that we may have as a city. So the CML actually was founded in the city of Wheat Ridge, in the offices that are just one floor above where I'm at right now. I always like to point that out when CML comes on. So Wheat Ridge is the home of CML, and it does great work for both us and cities across the see.
Well, Representative Duran, it's great to see you over here. I know that it's not too far from your house to City Hall, but we're meeting virtually as we have for the last year. So it's been a little bit different since we were last in our legislative session, but we're happy to have you here. I know you've got a few pieces of legislation working through the process, and I hope you'll tell us what you've got going and what else of interest is on the Hill that we should be looking at. So the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. It's good to be here. Good to see so many familiar faces. So we've been back in session at the Capitol for just about a month, and a lot has gone on, as I'm sure most of you know. I think the most important focus for all of us right now is kind of the economic recovery from the pandemic, which is really at the forefront, down at the Capitol as to what we're working on. There's two things I wanted to mention. One was we have and just passed the 2021 supplemental funding package, which is really kind of addressed at, public schools, our roads, transportation, just kind of recovering funding for wildfires, natural disasters. So that's one end of the supplementals that we just passed. The other thing that we have, and this was after we got some information back on some other funding that we had, it's a stimulus package. Really we're gonna use to kind of jumpstart our economic recovery here in Colorado. So I'm really excited about that. I've got a lot more information on that if you want to reach out to me. But I think with this, it's really aimed at some of our small businesses, grants for some of our small businesses, as we know, have really struggled and suffered during the pandemic. But then it also helps with childcare, mental health. So a lot of different things that the pandemic has shined the light on. I mean, it's been there. I just think through the pandemic, we really realized the need and the needs of what's out there in the community and what we need to focus on. So really excited about that. We're getting ready to do our budget. So that's another thing that's going to be coming up, the long bill. I wanted to, if you're interested, I've got a little bit of a breakdown as far as the stimulus package as to where some of these dollars are going to go. And I just thought I'd give you a little bit of that information. We've got about $10 to $15 million that are going to energize the Colorado Gap Fund, about $40 million in restaurant sales tax relief, about $10 million to incentivize events, conferences remaining in or coming into Colorado, which, as we know, is so important. We've got about $30 million in Main Street revitalization efforts, which is also important in our communities. We've got about 60 to 80 million in matching funds for affordable housing and transformation of the downtown community spaces. So as you know, a lot of folks have been struggling with not just affordable housing, but just being able to pay their rent and things like that. So that's really a lot of what we're going to be addressing during the session. Also, for me personally, a lot of bills that I was working on last session, we had to delay because of the pandemic, right? We had to take care of the needs at hand. So a few of those I decided to bring back this time, and a few have already been introduced, and a matter of fact, have gotten out of the House and are on their way up to the Senate. And one that we debated on for about 10 hours was safe gun storage. So that was and is a really important bill that I see when it comes to saving lives of our children. So that bill just got out of thirds, and that's on its way up to the Senate. I've got, let's see, there's quite a few in the hopper here. Some, like I said, it's just been a month, so quite a few have been introduced. One that's going to be heard this week, it's a private construction retainage bill, where we're reducing that 10% to 5%. And Mayor, you probably have heard about this bill. We've done a lot of work on it. I totally kind of transformed it from what it was last year. I think it was taken on way too much, just narrowed it down to the retainage portion. So we're in a really good place. We have bipartisan support on this bill in the House and the Senate, and that'll be heard on Thursday. That's coming. I've got some other bills that I'm working on around domestic violence. As many of you know, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. So a lot of bills pertaining to that. To my dental background, I've got a dental sunset bill that's coming up. So really quite a lot that's going to be coming up and will still be introduced. But really what I'd like to hear, and I know I don't get all of you in the same place at one time, is just really what's going on right in our community. I hear little bits and pieces of the struggles, like with the vaccine and access to that, but really kind of like to hear what's going on in our community. But that gives you an overall idea of what we're working on in just a month that we've been back, and a lot more to work on as we move forward. But it's just really kind of recovery from the pandemic and getting back on our feet and getting our small businesses up and going.
Thank you, Representative Duran. And you did mention your retainage bill, and I want to say we have heard about that. And I'm, from the other side of the world, we appreciate your efforts in making that sort of a single subject, and it looks like we've got good support around the industry for that. So I really appreciate you crafting a bill that can get broad support.
Great, thank you. I'm excited about that. And like you said, there's a lot of broad support, a lot of hours of stakeholding. Are there many other issues we need to address? Absolutely. But I think we can do those individually. And that is something that I'm dedicated to doing as we move forward. But I really felt we needed to narrow this down, and so far, so good.
Well, great. Thank you very much. I don't have a really scripted form for tonight, so let me open it up to questions from council for Representative Duran. If there's anything in particular you'd like to ask at this time, I think next we'll go to Megan Dollar with CML. I don't see Senator Danielson on the call, but let me know if when she's able to come, and we want to get her into our conversation also. But any questions for Representative Duran right at this particular time? Ms. Nosler-Beck and then Ms. Hulteen.
Hi, Monica. Thanks so much for being here. I had a quick question for you. I just was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about what the GAP fund dollars are. Just when you were going through what the budget, how those dollars are all coming, I don't think everybody kind of understands what those dollars are for.
Thank you for that question. I don't have all those details on me, but I'm happy to get them to you, Val.
Okay.
And I can send them to you and you can forward them on.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Representative Duran. I appreciate you representing our community, and as a graduate of this fair council. I'm interested primarily in knowing where the conversation is around transportation funding this year. I've heard, and I'm sure Megan will have a couple things to say about that, but I have sat in on a couple of statewide calls, and I know we've heard about this for years and years, and it's not getting any better as we are continuing to not identify funding for our transportation issues. And particularly in Wheat Ridge, we've got Kipling, which is an identified high priority CDOT project awaiting some funding. So would love to hear where that conversation is now and what we're hoping to accomplish this year on that.
Well, I can tell you this. I know that a bill is coming. It hasn't been introduced yet, and it's a large transportation bill. That is being run, if I recall, by Speaker Garnett and Representative Gray. And I have not seen the bill yet, so I don't want to speculate on what's in there and what it will do. But I can assure you that those conversations are taking place. Megan may be able to shine some more light on that, but we understand the importance of what we need. Like I said, I think the pandemic, it's been there all along, right? Issues with transportation, lack of funding, and I think through the pandemic, it's really made a lot more folks aware that we need to address this somehow. We need to do something, and what can we do? So I know between the governor's office and between us, we are trying to figure out what we can do and where we can find the funds for what we need to do, or at least a start, right? It's not going to take care of everything. So I will yield to Megan, and then happy to follow up when that bill is introduced. Rachel, if you'd like me to. It hasn't been yet. I know we're supposed to get an update on that shortly.
Great, appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions at this time for Representative Duran? And you'll be able to take another crack later, I'm sure, if something comes up. All right, well, why don't we go to Megan Dollar with CML, and Megan's always got a very interesting proposal and is really right on top of what's happening downtown. So Megan, welcome, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Mayor, members of the council, and of course, special shout out to CML Executive Board Member Leah Dozman. Councilmember Dozman, nice to see you. Gotta recognize the board members, you know. So thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. I will go through CML's legislative priorities, and I can give a little bit more of an update on the transportation, although Representative Duran, you're absolutely right. I don't know that we're not really sure what's going to be in the bill just yet either, but we have an idea of what might be in the bill. So hopefully, you know, there will be things that we like. So first I'll talk about two pieces of CML initiated legislation. And these were ones that we had introduced last year, but of course, due to the shortened session, did not make the cut. And so we reintroduced them this year. The first one is, it's House Bill 1025. Representative Arndt is on the bill, and this actually did come from the city of Fort Collins as a request for CML initiated legislation. And what the bill does, and it's actually already passed through the House of Representatives, and it's headed to the Senate, or it is in the Senate, I should say. It basically clarifies the law, which was a little gray, on whether or not non-substantive email conversations. So for example, you all are on an email together and there was like a forward, or there was a question from a constituent, is that subject to open meetings law? And we are clarifying that it is not. It's got broad support. I think 9 people voted against it in the House. But this is one that so far, and Heather in my office, my colleague Heather, she's running that piece of legislation. And so far so good. I should probably back up a little bit and just mention, so I am the CML Legislative Advocacy Manager. I coordinate the team, I run the team, but I do a quarter of all the advocacy down at the State House. And my colleagues, Bo Clarion Thomas, Megan McKillop, yes, another Megan with an H, just to make things even more confusing for you all, and the legislature, of course, as well as Heather Stoffer, are my colleagues and counterparts, and we all cover different areas of the law. We're tracking a couple hundred pieces of legislation at the moment. So lo and behold, as it turns out, municipalities are affected by a number of bills this year. And so I should probably mention that. So some of these bills I'm going to talk about, I don't have all the information on it, or if I don't, I will get you the right person if you have questions that I can't answer. So yeah, so the other piece of CML initiated legislation is House Bill 211117, which Representative, I am tasked to actually talk to you about this. So maybe we could do it offline too, but you'll get my pitch right now. So what the deal is so back in 1981, I'm going to give you my quick elevator speech. Back in 1981, in response to a ballot initiative, citizen-driven in the city of Boulder, the legislature passed a law saying that no local governments can enact an ordinance that controls rents, focused on your kind of rent control on existing buildings, New York City style rent control, right? Local governments acted at per normal after that because our members weren't necessarily interested in doing rent control. What they were interested though was in housing impact ordinances and inclusionary zoning ordinances that allow municipalities to require a percentage of affordable housing in new developments. And then the Telluride decision happened. And the Supreme Court said, nope, you can't have those ordinances. That is a violation of the rent control statute. We've seen about 6 or 7 different iterations of this bill. One that passed back in 2010 that allowed for voluntary agreements between municipalities and developers for affordable housing. But this year, this bill that we're running, 1117, it clears the air. It says local governments within their land use authority can promote affordable housing in new developments. The idea being that the local government can determine on a project by project basis what the needs are of the community. this is a tool that that some municipalities have ordinances on the books, but right now this is a tool that we are not clear that we can utilize at this point. And so that's why CML is pushing 1117, and we have a number of supporters behind it, including organizations like, anywhere from Colorado Coalition for the Homeless to, Housing Colorado, to the Renters Roundtable, to the AFL-CIO is supporting this bill as well. And so we have a broad coalition of support. And so I'm hopeful that we can see that through, and we're actually scheduled to do that bill on second reading at some point this week. So a big deal for us, certainly, and has definitely garnered a lot of discussion among the housing community. And admittedly, we do have some opponents. The home builders, the apartment association, and the realtors are currently opposed to the bill. But alas, this is important policy that we need to move forward. And just for our representatives that are on the bill are Representatives Lontine and Gonzalez Gutierrez as well. So, so we will continue to push that policy forward with the hopes of it passing. And then let me talk a little bit about transportation. So we, like the representative said, we are aware that a bill is coming. The funding sources that they're looking at an increase. We're going to call it a fee, but an increase to the current gas tax. You're going to see fees on third-party ride sharing, on Amazon deliveries, lots of different types of fees. And what's interesting is from having conversations with the sponsors, one of the things that the entities that are being, sorry, you're gonna hear my kids screaming in the background a little bit. Sorry about that. It's just what happens now. There's one of the things of the entities that are going to be getting these fees or dealing with these fees, they just didn't want to be picked out. As long as everyone else was going to have the fee, then they were okay, oddly enough. So so that's how the revenue is going to be collected. I don't know entirely what that means numbers wise and how much that means. And I don't know, the last conversation that CML had with the sponsors, they weren't sure yet. So that'll be the question. But of course, for our purposes, okay, you raise all this new money, where is it going? So I can tell you that CML is certainly advocating that, it go to municipalities, via our usual formula for the Highway Users Tax Fund. And we definitely have some municipalities that are certainly interested in multimodal and climate-based responses as well for transportation. And I think that's something that the governor is also interested as well. And honestly, the Democratic caucus generally, I think it's a fair point to say that focusing on the climate impacts of transportation is going to be a part of this bill, for sure. So leadership is on it, along with the Speaker and Representative Gray are on it. And then in the Senate, I know that the Majority Leader Finberg and Faith Winter will be the co-sponsors on that too. And Faith Winter is chair of the committee, of the Transportation Committee in there, in the Senate right now. So I think honestly, it's so far good news on the transportation front. We won't count our chickens just yet, but I've been with CML coming up on a decade now, and there's not been an actual transportation solution since my time. So we're hopeful. I will just touch on a few bills. We're seeing, and I'm sure the chief, I think your chief is on here. Yes. I'm sure you'll have some opinions on some of this legislation I'm going to talk about as well. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of action in the criminal justice arena. We're seeing, so Senate Bill 64, which is called jail depopulation. This is one that is being brought by the ACLU that is essentially saying, we changed practices during COVID in order to create more social distancing in jails. And the sky didn't fall. Let's continue those practices. I will tell you this much. I think a lot of members of the community of just your constituents as well as my members don't agree with that premise. They don't agree that the sky hasn't fallen. There's a real opinion that crime has gone up, and there's been some reporting on that. And so that's definitely something to think about. CML was opposed unless amended. We had to negotiate to a neutral, or give a neutral position in order to get some additional amendments into the bill, specifically around when individuals can be held on monetary bond when they fail to appear. So we are currently in a formerly opposed position, although I want to note that the chiefs of police are extremely opposed. And I want to note that because that's important. And I know that there are a lot of members of certainly individual members, CML members, that have concerns with it. And so I'm certainly, to the extent that I can, still having conversations with the ACLU on potential improvements to the bill. But I understand the position that the chiefs have taken, which is enough is enough. We're not doing this anymore. And so I think that's fair. So I would be remiss if I didn't bring that one up. And of course, we are going to see some sort of follow-up to the Law Enforcement Integrity Act last year, which is Senate Bill 2217. There are going to be two versions, and I don't know which one or whether they'll be combined or not, but there is one that's being brought by Senate Republicans that essentially has our list of, hey, we'd really like to see all of this clarified in the law. And that, I won't go too far into the weeds, but essentially, getting definitions for things like contacts, and, clarifying use of force and things of that nature. The bill was huge. And so, of course, in 10 days, we didn't get it right. So, so we're going to go back and take another bite at the apple. And I don't know exactly what that looks like at this point. I do know that the sponsors, particularly the House sponsors, Representatives Herod and Gonzalez Gutierrez, I expect them to bring a bill as well. And so that we'll have to kind of navigate the waters a little bit on, which bill we need to work with. And my guess, it'll probably be the one coming from the House. But certainly it's my hope that maybe both parties combine and work together on it, and we shall see on that. But that will be another big discussion going through this session. I'm trying to think of what else I want to hit on that's important here. Let me just take a look at my cheat sheet just to make sure. Oh yeah, actually one other bill, there's two bills I want to talk about. So Senate Bill 64, which is actually adds elected officials to, currently if you harass or retaliate against a judge, there's a higher sentence for if you are found guilty of that crime. And the bill, Senate Bill 64, excuse my brain, allows elected officials, or includes elected officials in that statute. So that's one that CML is supporting. And the other bill I want to talk about is House Bill, I think it's 1051. Forgive me. This is one in Heather's wheelhouse. And what it does is, this kind of stemmed from it's House Bill 1051. So right now, as I'm sure many of you know, if you are hiring somebody in an executive position, that the top three candidates are currently subject to open records requests, so the press can see who the top three candidates are. The Colorado Association of School Boards, in response to something that came out of CU, is running legislation to say we will provide the finalist, but we will not be providing the top three candidates. And the idea being, and this is the feedback that we got from our members, is that you end up losing good candidates for those positions because they don't want their current position to be aware that they're looking. And it's actually happened a lot more frequently than you would expect. So that is one that we are supportive of. And that will be in business. I think it's in Business Affairs and Labor this week. And that's one that CML supports, and Representative Byrd and Representative Shannon Byrd, and then Representative Tim Geithner are also, it's a bipartisan bill as well. So those are kind of my high hits. Oh, no, wait, I almost forgot a big one. Sorry. Plastics. Let's talk about plastics. House Bill 1162. So House Bill 1162 does, and I can't go super into detail. This is Megan McKillop's bill in our office. But what it does is it essentially combines 3 bills from last year. One of them was ours that did not make it out of Senate local government, which removes the preemption of on local governments to regulate plastics. There's currently a preemption in law. It creates a statewide bag ban, and then that is slowly rolled in, and then also slowly removes or disallows the use of polystyrene as well. Really big bill, big program. We are actually we had very robust discussions in our policy committee as well as our board. But ultimately, we decided we were directed to support the bill, and that was the staff recommendation, in order to make sure that we keep the language in the bill that removes the preemption, and that preemption would be removed in 2023. So that bill was just heard in committee last Thursday. There are some concerns from the business community that local governments are just going to go nuts and start banning everything the second we are allowed to. We certainly push back on that. That's not something that we agree with, and we take time and do thoughtful policy, and so that doesn't really make sense. And so I know that will be, I think it's going to finance next, and then you're going to hear it and then it will be heard in the Senate, or excuse me, in the House floor. So that's one that I wanted to hit on as well. But certainly if there's anything that you all want to hear more about or I forgot, I'm happy to answer questions or tackle any other bills.
Thank you very much, Megan, for that report. We will throw this open to questions from council. Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions that two of the bills that I wanted to ask questions about. One of them is 1097, which is the establish a behavioral health administration. Mm-hmm. And it was through a recommendation of a task force. When I looked it up, though, it didn't have a lot of information about what the BHA would be doing. So do you know kind of what the plan is for the BHA?
Absolutely. And Bo Clarine Thomas in her office covers public health, so she's covering this bill. But let me take a look here to get you that information. The reason that we are supportive of it is that it creates an opportunity for local governments to potentially get services through this behavioral health entity, this administration that's being did I freeze? Oh no, I didn't, sorry. That's being created. But let me look at specifically what they're trying to do. And forgive me, I'm not as familiar with this bill, but I'll muddle through here. I'll tell you what, Councilmember, why don't I get Bo Clarine to respond to you, because I think if I muddle through, you might not get the right information. Is that all right? I lost you on my screen.
Yeah, that'll work. Thank you, Megan.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, let me get that so you get good information. I apologize, as opposed to me just reading the bill in front of you.
All right, thank you. Additional questions for Megan Dollar with CML. Megan, on SB 62, what types of amendments you all were looking for amendments on that? What types of amendments were you looking for?
So I will tell you where I started and where I ended. How about that? So the initial amendments we wanted was to lower the amount of FTAs. Right now, an individual can fail to appear 3 times and not be held on monetary bond, although they can still be arrested, certainly. We would have liked to have seen that. And what I really was trying to get at, and the amendments sort of get to this, but not as much as I would have liked, but this is what happens kind of in the sausage making, was essentially saying that an individual can't just intentionally obstruct the criminal justice system. And so it kind of went through kind of the sausage making and negotiations between CML, CDAC, and the ACLU. What ended up getting included in the bill was language that said, you know, if a witness has been called, and that includes law enforcement, and somebody doesn't show up to the hearing, they can be held on monetary bond. And then if an individual is not appearing in order to kind of harass or what's the word? I'm sorry, I apologize. Harass or just intimidate the witness, or excuse me, a witness or a victim, that they can be held on bond. So it's not everything we wanted. The kind of the politics around it, you know, how do I put this? You know, the ACLU is in a strong position generally at the Capitol. And so we kind of on the law enforcement community side, although again, I want to reiterate that the chief's position, because that's important, that they're extremely opposed. Some of the other law enforcement groups felt like it was important to try to work it out. And so that's where we did. And that was kind of where my position recommendation was coming from in the policy committee, as well as into the board, was an oppose unless amended position to provide an opportunity to get some amendments. And additionally, there's also language in there that it was supposed to actually be included, but we were able to fix that, which was allowing local governments to retain their bond schedules as well, which was important. So again, not a perfect bill. I think that's probably underselling it. It's still a problem. It's still problematic. And I'm well aware that many of our members agree with that. What ultimately I think was interesting though is I think we had some members that actually testify in an individual capacity, actually testify in support of the bill when it was in committee. So there's a little bit of a divide there too. So there's my story, but I'm happy to talk more about that. I appreciate the question.
Mayor, would you maybe like to continue that conversation? We do have Chief Murtha and our division chiefs, Lawrence and Quadnola on. And this is one bill they would like to speak about tonight. Fortunately, there's not many bills we're real concerned about this year at a municipal level. So, but I think the criminal justice bills, there are a few concerning, and this is definitely one of them. And our chief and then our judge is on the line too. Chris Randall's on the line too. But if it's okay with you, Mayor, maybe it's a good time for them to talk about maybe some of their concerns with the bill.
I think it's the perfect opportunity, and I will yield the floor to Chief Murtha.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, Representative Duran, Ms. Dollar, thank you for a few minutes tonight. Let me start off by saying we're certainly not against reform. You know, none of my peers, none of the chiefs of police have indicated in any way that they think that things have to stay exactly the same way that they are. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the Senate Bill 21-062, the jail population management tools, I think you would be surprised to find out that what this bill does try and accomplish is that nobody can be arrested for a traffic offense, a petty offense, a municipal offense, a misdemeanor offense, a class 4, 5, or 6 felony without meeting a very specific set of criteria. Certainly, Ms. Dollar has pointed to the monetary bond aspect of it, and there's another provision which deals with the sheriff having some sway in what they do within their own specific jails. But when it comes to policing, these are the things that really concern us: our inability to interrupt crime in a way that we're used to. So let me start by saying the job of law enforcement has never really changed. Underlying everything, it's to protect property and it's to protect life. That's what we do. The tools of the job, what we're given, is decided by our elected politicians and society. For the last forever, jail has been an option for those people who are certainly career criminals. I will suggest to you, and some of this is my own personal opinion, but we are the last line of defense after multiple systems have either been underfunded or have not addressed the issues as they've come along. And I'm talking about issues at home, issues in schools, issues with mental health, addiction. When those systems don't perform to the level they're supposed to, we end up with people who are at risk of committing criminal acts. And we are the line between victims and criminals. And so as we stand here, or as we look at this bill tonight, I want to stress the fact that we're concerned that we don't have an opportunity to interrupt crime in the way that we currently do. Now, the criminal justice system is full of checks and balances. We're not the judge, jury, and executioner of anything. We decide if there's probable cause to arrest somebody, we turn them over to our judicial system, to the DA, to the judges, to the juries, to the legislature's will, and they decide how we proceed. Recently, the word of the day in the criminal justice system is reform. So anything with reform attached to it seems to be getting a lot of traction. And I think that the theory there is that if strike while the iron is hot. We want to move on these bills while we have, momentum. The problem with that is that we saw in Senate Bill 2217, that took us months to try and even come up with a framework to how to put that into place. Here again is a reactionary bill written by most accounts by the ACLU and handed to the legislature to say, here, this will fix the system. I don't see in this bill anywhere that suggests that there is a solution for what happens when we empty the jails out. I'm here to tell you that the current social experiment under COVID, by force, obviously, of nature, to have to keep people separated is a failure. And that's why the chiefs of police are so adamantly opposed. We see crime rising. We're struggling to get our numbers right in Wheat Ridge, but we know that we've had a significant rise in crime. Anybody who looks on Nextdoor or has a Ring app knows packages are stolen every day, motor vehicle thefts are up. We're seeing crime and we're seeing crime on the rise. And that's not a good thing. We're seeing more victims, and we're hearing a lot from our community. Very upset about the direction of some of the criminal justice system right now. We've been able to sort of quell those questions and concerns because people understand this is a unique time in the pandemic. But codifying the current situation, the current system, in my opinion, is a terrible way forward. This bill really values criminal actors over victims, in my opinion. It puts it really puts the system in favor of trying to help criminals, where it devalues the person who's the victim of the crime. We're not against reform, but it must be done in a manner that either changes, updates, or replaces the current system, not just opens the jail and says somebody else will figure it out. For those of us old enough to remember Geraldo Rivera and his reporting on Willowbrook, know that that was maybe the straw that broke the camel's back for people who were institutionalized, and we would all agree that the system there had failed. But what was contemplated as a replacement for that system, which was allowing people who are mentally at risk to go out in society, and we would give them some sort of psychotropic drug and they would be fine, didn't really work. We're seeing the results of that today. So what I'm suggesting is, let's not continue to make the same mistakes we've made in the past and just hope that this works in the way that we think it will. It's not working now. I'm here to tell you that it is not working in our community. We see criminals in Wheat Ridge who consistently reoffend the same crime. We write them a citation, they reoffend the same crime. We call the jail, they won't take them, they reoffend. That quadruples or even greater, even creates a greater number of victims from one individual actor. We know that the vast majority of our crimes are committed by a small number of people. We have no way to interrupt those people right now. Very few tools to do that. That has been really the way we've acted as a law enforcement entity for years. We interrupt it. We give people a chance. We give them a break. We take them. We remove them from the situation, and it changes the outcome more often than not. But we're not having that luck right now. We're seeing issues repeat. So I think, you know, before I turn it over to our division chiefs who can give you some concrete and good examples of the issues we're seeing here in Wheat Ridge specifically, I just want to say that I think that if our citizens knew what was in this bill, they would be shocked. I get calls personally from people who say, we called the police, we saw you catch the person who was the bad actor, and then they left that person there. And I have to explain to those individuals, we no longer can arrest and remove that person from the situation. And they're shocked to find out that that person remains on the scene. And potentially they feel threatened by that. So we're opposed to the bill in its current form. Again, not opposed to reform, just to this bill in its current form and the fact that it doesn't contemplate a solution or a replacement for this jail system we have. With that said, I want to turn it over to Division Chief Guadagnola, who works on our CACP Legislative Committee and has some information and some specific examples.
Well, thank you. I think
Ms. Dozeman had a question.
Yeah, sorry. Chief Murtha, I just wanted to follow up on that because I've had several families who have reached out to me recently. One of which is my son's best friend, who have decided to move out of Wheat Ridge and buy homes outside of this community because they said that the crime rates and the homelessness issues and the drugs are rampant and they don't want to be raising their children in this community any longer. So I thought we were kind of coming over this hump of, you know, being able to be a city that attracts young families and into our schools. And I had seen that trend going upward, but now people are choosing to move out of this community because they don't feel it's safe to raise their kids here. So I have not in support of this bill whatsoever. And I think we've kind of passed on some of the issues to be able to address the homelessness and drug problems that we're seeing in our community. And I can honestly say my constituents are the most upset about the car thefts, burglaries, drug use, finding needles in the park, the trash, homelessness camps popping up everywhere, the Greenbelt. There was a fire that was recently in the Greenbelt, and like there's just all sorts of issues, and this completely undermines your ability to do anything about those issues. And I really appreciate you speaking to this issue.
Thank you, Ms. Dozeman. I'll offer a quick comment on that, if you don't mind. You know, the officers here work really hard to try and intercept crime, and they do a good job of it, but issuing somebody a piece of paper after they've already demonstrated a complete disregard for the criminal justice system does not deter somebody. You mentioned the homelessness, persons experiencing homelessness in our community, and let me just comment on that really quickly. You know, persons experiencing homelessness, there are resources out there for those folks who want to take advantage of them. What we struggle with as a police department is the folks who are really suffering from addiction or mental health issues, and their unwillingness to take advantage of the current opportunities because they don't want to be constrained by the rules. And I don't say that just as an opinion. We've conducted interviews, and we currently have in service a person who came from a life of living on the street, that came to talk to our officers, an addicted person who said, the only thing that stopped me was going to jail when the Denver SWAT team arrested me. I'm not just suggesting that that's the only way that people can get off of drugs or, you know, find a path to a different life. I'm suggesting that was his way, and he was pretty adamant that that was the case. But anyway, I didn't want to get too far off the path. I'll turn it back over to Darrell Guadagnola.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to also thank Representative Duran for being here, as well as Ms. Dollar. And just with regard to this bill, I think Ms. Dollar's opening comments were that the ACLU predicates this bill on the notion that the sky is not falling, and mine would be a voice that disagrees with that in some regard. Now, the chief mentioned I do sit on CACP's legislative committee. That's something that I've done for probably about 10 years. And our legislative committee is actively opposed to this bill for a number of reasons. Ultimately, it is really anti-victim. And it, as the chief mentioned, there's a lot of things in here that if the general public knew were in here, they'd be appalled by it. I have a couple of examples here recently. Now, with COVID and the pandemic, we have had the jail modify who we could take to jail and who we could incarcerate. On the 4th of January this year, a man was arrested after stealing a woman's purse at Safeway there on Wadsworth. Our patrol officers did a great job. They apprehended him at the bus stop, and turned out he had a felony warrant for second-degree burglary. The jail wouldn't take him. We had to let him go. December 15th of this year, we found a gentleman who had a felony warrant out of Denver for burglary. The jail would not take him. Back in November, on the 12th of November, we contacted a gentleman for trespassing at a residence where he wasn't supposed to be. He had a felony parole issued warrant for burglary, and the jail wouldn't take him. We had to let him go. On October 28th, we received a notice that a gentleman was trespassing in a hotel room where he wasn't supposed to be. When we found him, he was found to have 2 active warrants for possession of burglary tools, and the jail wouldn't take him. And there are example after example after example of these cases where people have these felony warrants for this criminal activity that we are seeing a rise in. And I'm just going to talk about 5 types of crime right now that we track: robbery, burglary, motor vehicle theft, first-degree trespass, which is essentially breaking into a vehicle, and then offenses related to fraud and forgery. Now, in January of 2020, before the lockdown, before COVID hit, we had 1 robbery that occurred January 2020. With these enhanced jail standards, as they're called, in January of this year, we had 6. Now, when we look at our criminal activity on average per year, or number of incidents, we do that in a 5-year average. So the average number of robberies that we have any given year is 28. So just using January of this year as a metric, at that pace, we are going to beat our 5-year rolling average by May of this year. Burglaries, January of 2020, we had 15. January of this year, we had 33. On average, we have 195 a year, and we're set to outpace that rolling average by June. Motor vehicle thefts, as Councilor Dozeman, I think, mentioned. In January 2020, we had 17. January this year, we had 50. We normally have 279 a year, and again, we're on pace to eclipse our rolling average by June of this year. First-degree trespass, breaking into a car. January 2020, we had 22 incidents. January this year, we had 58. And then the last category, fraud and forgery. January of 2020, we took 33 reports. January of this year, we've taken 93. At the current rate, we will eclipse our 5-year rolling average by next month. So I'm not trying to scream that the sky is falling, but I certainly would disagree with the notion that the sky is not falling. I think this bill is deeply flawed, and that's just a couple of the reasons why CACP and why we just remain absolutely opposed to it. I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
So,
Mr. Murthy.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask Daryl, if you could send me that data, that would be really helpful. Or any other, Chief Murtha, if you have any other data that you can share with me, comparing, where things were, say, in January, right before the pandemic, and where they are now. Just any kind of information like that would be helpful for me.
We'll put it together and we'll get you some.
Thank you.
Ms. Constable.
Chief, it sounded like you wanted to say something. You can go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that the examples that Division Chief Guadagnola gives, we've arrested people for all those crimes. When you look at forgery, we find people at our hotels and in the hotel district by I-70 and Kipling all the time in possession of materials that don't belong to them, financial materials. And we're forced to issue them a citation. Those people go on to reoffend. We've had issues where folks have tried to break the window at Circle K on Kipling. We stop them, we issue them a citation, we remove them from the property, they're back 15 minutes later, we do it again. we do it again. And then maybe the 5th time the jail will get them. But that's 5 crimes that we've done a good job to intercept that we can't stop because, you know, we're under these standards. So it's just really to sort of set the stage for why crime is up, because we have a small number of actors and nobody's stopping them. So that being said, I have Division Chief Lawrence on here. I think he has a few comments on where we stand as well.
Thanks, Chief. You know, Daryl's very good with the statistics. I can tell you just anecdotally how officers feel about, you know, catching people in the act of crimes, catching people after crimes and letting them go. And, you know, it may be a cliche that you see on the side of a police car is to protect and to serve, but it's very true that that's why officers get into the business. They want to protect, they want to serve. The vast majority see it as a calling. And when they feel like they don't have the ability to protect and to serve, if they feel like they are just, you know, writing a ticket to somebody who ignores it, it gets very, very disheartening for officers. And officers across the state, we have seen declines in applications. We have seen more officers leaving to get into other lines of work because they're not quite sure right now whether they can make a difference. It's just something that we see every day. One of the things I see every day is the number of warrants that people have that we contact, and we can't honor those warrants. We can't take somebody to jail. When I started, you know, in the 80s, a warrant was an order by a judge that you had to take someone into custody and you had to take them to jail. You didn't have any choice about such things. Today, we have people that have 5, 6, 7 warrants, and they may be misdemeanor warrants. They may not be serious crimes that we're dealing with, but we just can't stop we can't stop the crime that's occurring very easily. And I think the criminals know that. I think they're not terribly concerned about it. And I think they reoffend. If nothing else, jail can be an attention getter, and it can be, you know, people don't want to be there. So maybe they'll think twice before committing a crime if they feel like they have to go to jail. I don't feel like they see that right now. So I'll push back to the chief here and let him take over.
So, I'm sorry, Ms. Nostelbeck, I think I cut you off with a question you might have had before I answered.
No, I just, never mind. We are all good. I didn't have a question. I think my question might be more for Megan. So with this bill, it seems like this bill is pretty flawed in terms of, you know, it being kind of led with just one point of view. What can we do as a city, as city councilors, to, you know, make sure that the other side of the story is heard at the Capitol? What are we doing in terms of like testifying on the bill and stuff?
So the bill's been heard in committee in the Senate, and it's parked in appropriations right now. There is a little bit of a fiscal note on it. My suggestion would be to, and I'm happy to help facilitate this too, and I'm sure CACP's lobbyists can as well, is to talk to Senator Danielson directly about your concerns. You know, the Senate is close. It's a closer vote. And so, you know, that certainly having those conversations would be helpful for her. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest thing you can do. Assuming that it makes it out of the Senate, it will be heard in House Judiciary, I'm sure. And so that's certainly an opportunity for testimony. And I know that there are some local electeds that are considering testifying in opposition to the bill in the House. And again, I'm happy to facilitate any of that and help out.
That I think is really valuable in this conversation that we're having is that Chief Murtha, as he's done with so many other issues and things that are happening in our community, always looks for a path forward, and how we can work with this. And I think, there's a issue with crowding in jails. That is one thing that we're trying to solve for. But I think there's also an opportunity to tell this story and also talk about how a bill like this can be adjusted. And that's what's great about the policymaking process, is that, we keep that story out there, that there's, it's not one or the other.
What I think is probably, Chief, I'm going to put a little bit of words in your mouth or attempt to paraphrase what you said, but I think that your point about, okay, we're going to quote put this policy in place, but then there's no actual solution outside of that, right? There's no new plan. And honestly, I think that's a really good talking point, because that wasn't really something that, I certainly contemplated that, but I think that generally would be it would resonate, I think.
Those are the exact same things that I wrote down and what Chief said too. So anyway, I think we could probably talk about it forever, but I just, I think that this is a really good, well-rounded conversation that provides a lot of context to what the bill's all about. So I really appreciate Chief Lawrence and Chief Murtha coming over and talking to us about all of this.
Ms. Noslerbeck, if I could just add one quick comment. I think the judge probably has a few comments as well, but the profession of policing and police chiefs, as the lead of that, we've lost community trust to a certain extent. The incidents that have occurred around the nation may not have occurred in Wheat Ridge, but it doesn't matter. People have dismissed our voices as maybe a group that doesn't see reality the way it needs to. I'm suggesting to you that these are the facts, and these are the numbers, and these are the crimes that we're seeing. And what I'm asking for is your support, because while my voice may not be as strong as it used to be for anybody in my position, it is hard for me to look at these numbers. It's hard for us who have pride in trying to protect the community to say that we're not seeing things going our way. And we come tonight to ask, counsel, Mr. Rand, to look at this and to say, well, we always look at the bills and we go, well, okay, what's the plan? There's no plan that we can see here. So I'm asking you to ask them to come back and contemplate, how are we supposed to police in a society? And how am I supposed to tell somebody that, yes, your neighbor committed a felony, you're a witness to it, we're going to write them a citation? That's tough. It's tough for us to say. We're not against reform. We're for it. We just want to know what the plan is. So with that, Mr. Goff, if I could turn it over to Judge Randall, I think he's on this time.
I see Representative Duran has her hand up, and I'd like to give her an opportunity.
Sure.
Well, I won't take a lot of time. I just want to say that I appreciate Chief Murtha and everyone here who has kind of shined the light. I haven't seen that bill yet, and every bill that I get, I read, and I like to hear both sides. So really appreciative and grateful to hear your side. And just keep in mind, yes, it's up in the Senate. Yes, I think it's going to go judiciary. But even if changes aren't made there, it does have to come to the House. And I know who that sponsor is. I've just been messaging to get more information on this bill and to see who the sponsor is, so I can have those conversations with her and to ask, what is the plan, right? That I've heard from my chief, and here's what my chief says in Wheat Ridge. And here are their concerns. So I will ask them. I'll circle back around with you. This has been really enlightening for me to hear, because this is something that I haven't heard at all. And hearing not just my counsel, right, but hearing my police chief say, look, our hands are tied. We feel like our hands are tied. We're here to do a job. We can't do our job, and we want to. And we support reform, but we don't support not being able to do our job. And that's why I want that data too, because that's going to help me. And reach out. I mean, you reach out to your senator, but you reach out to your representatives, and not just me, right? There's 41 of us. you reach out to each one, send out an email to each of those, because your voice needs to be heard. And I need to be able to have your voice behind me when I say, wait a minute, this doesn't look right to me. I can't support this unless you're willing to, you know, if you can compromise, find a compromise somewhere and find common ground that you're comfortable with. So this is beneficial. I just wanted to say that. I appreciate it. I'll circle back around with you also once I have those conversations.
Thank you.
Representative, and we do have Judge Chris Randall with us tonight. Judge, please take the floor.
All right, thanks, Mayor, and good evening to all. Little background on the area of law that this proposed bill falls under. It falls under the criminal procedure area, and it addresses bail and types of bonds. And the point of a bond, whether it's a monetary bond or a PR bond, is to assure a person's appearance in court. And that hasn't been happening. And with this new bill, it's going to be worse. So one of you were asking, what can you do to change it? One of the changes would be to eliminate the 3 failure to appear requirement. So as it's written now, you automatically get 3 PR bonds. I don't agree with any bond. It should be based on the judge's discretion. And we have, there's 12 or 14 things you look at to set a bond, the type of bond, the amount of bond. And that's the way the bill should be written, is to let a judge take a look at the criteria and the considerations when setting a bond. Something in the bill that's a little troubling, and there's 2 parts to it. There's the police part and the court part. And whether you look at the police part or the court part, the bill doesn't address the community or the businesses in the community. So they've been forgotten or left out, and they're very important. Victims are crucial in criminal cases, and it seems like the community is just a forgotten piece of this bill. Commander Lawrence mentioned somebody that has a half dozen cases or a half dozen warrants. I actually have 2 people with 8 warrants and 1 with 11 warrants, and I can't resolve those cases because they have a merry-go-round. They go to jail, they get a PR bond, they get out, they commit another crime, they go to jail, they get out, and this goes on, week after week, month after month. And without the discretion to set a monetary bond, this just goes on and on and on. So any mandatory PR bonds is just not good criminal justice. It's not good criminal principles. And what's interesting about this, I don't think it's good for defendants for them to rack up cases and for their cases to drag on and on for months and months. And that's what's happening. So there comes a time to close cases. And under the current law, and definitely with this proposed bill, it's just going to get worse. So, and again, I agree with everything the chief said and the commander said. Well done there. They had more of a law enforcement focus. I think what it's going to do just cause terrible case management problems for court where we just cannot resolve cases. Any questions?
Judge, any questions for Judge Randall before we move forward? Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you, Judge. Thank you, Chief, and the Division Chiefs, Guadagnola and Lorenz, for bringing this up. I know this has been a topic of much discussion. I'd like to recognize our clerk, Mr. Kirkpatrick.
Very quickly, I am trained as a professional psychologist. I have done work with offenders in jails, in prisons in Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. No one has made the simple point that there are a number of mental health conditions for which there is no treatment. And for those individuals, recidivism is as plain and simple as waiting for the sun to come up tomorrow. For instance, people who molest children, people who have a history of driving while they're intoxicated, again and again. on a suspended or revoked license. I am not opposed to treating people who have mental illnesses. I'm simply making this point. There are some individuals, sociopaths, who have such severe mental illnesses that if Chief Murtha and their 2 division chiefs and their people arrest them 25 times, it will not matter. They'll go right back on the street and do it again, because in their minds, there is no deterrent. And I think that sort of thing has to be taken into this. We cannot reform our way out of some of these recidivist criminals because their mental health makes them be recidivist criminals, and they always will be. If we forget that, this is not reform, it's lunacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick. Mr. Goff.
Yeah, before we conclude this conversation, Mr. Mayor, I would like to request a consensus from council for staff, and including the chief, and to actively work on this bill, to either amend it until we're satisfied, or to get it defeated. You know, that it may require the chief or some of his commanders to testify at the legislature, but wanted to make sure council is in support of that we have a majority support consensus that we do oppose this bill as currently written.
Thank you. Before we go to a show of consensus, is there any are there any questions or discussions that anyone would like to have before we ask for a show of hands? Okay, Mr. Goff has asked for a consensus on working on this bill in that fashion. Do we have consensus? Please raise your hand if you favor that. Mr. Goff, there's your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to, before we close our legislative discussion, I want to ask if we have any more bills or any more issues that we'd like to bring forward. It's I don't know whether the pandemic has energized the legislative fervor in all of us, but it seems to be a stronger tide this year than some other years, and I appreciate it. Mrs. Nosler-Beck.
I just had a question about what's the leg session like? How long is it gonna go for? When is it going to end, since it started late and everything?
Yeah,
does it know?
Mr. Rand.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Tentatively, we're hearing the full 120 days, which I think takes us to June 14th.
14th, I think.
Yeah. Yes, if that changes, I'll let you know, but that's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion? Well, listen, that'll complete this phase of our legislative interest this year on this day. But we'll certainly want to thank our Representative Duran for coming and joining us. She's a member of our community, and Megan Dollar, thank you very much for your work at CML. A lot of interesting issues that are going through. We really appreciate the support that you give our city. And we know that you work hard for us, and we appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Reach out at any time. You know how to find me.
I certainly will. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
All right. Thanks so much. That will conclude our agenda item number 1. And we now have our second agenda item, which is number 2, the delegation of private activity bond cap to Foothills Regional Housing. And I'll go to Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, excited to bring back our representatives from the Foothills Regional Housing, who is our Jefferson County Housing Authority. I believe Ms. Sheck, did you just bring them over? We have Amy Case and Lori Rosendahl. Yep, there's Amy, and I think Lori's on there too. And they're here this evening to request from the city our 2021 private activity bond allocation. If you remember, twice over the last year, Foothills Regional Housing came to us and asked for our 2019 and 2020 private activity bond allocation, which they are currently using for renovation of the Caesar Square apartment complex off of always forget, 49th and Garrison.
I-70 and Garrison Road.
Yes, thank you. And that project's well underway. If you've been by there, you see there's some great improvements in there, and that's going to provide some long-term affordable housing, 108 units in Wheat Ridge. And it's a $10 million project, I believe, at least it was when they first started. So those budgets increase daily, it seems like, but great improvement into our community, great investment. So the Foothills Regional Housing has another project. It's not in Wheat Ridge, but it's just next door in Arvada, and it's serving our Jefferson County community, which is great. And I will turn it over to both Amy and Lori. I don't know who wants to start to talk about the project and make their request. So Lori, did you want to start? Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay? I'm having a little bit of technical issues, so.
You can.
I was trying to use the earbuds and they were fighting with the computer and I just surrendered. I'm just not good at this stuff. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear about our new community in Arvada. We are building 100 units in Arvada. It is a redevelopment of an old site that is there now. It was an old Section 8 project-based rental assistance site known as PBRA. We had 37 units there that had a subsidy contract with HUD. We have now moved that subsidy contract to a different property and are going to be tearing down those buildings. They were in pretty rough shape and weren't really living up to our mission. So we are going to be tearing those down and building 100 units, roughly about 50, I think it's about 54th and Allison. We'll be building 100 units of affordable housing there with 30 units set aside for youth transitioning out of foster care, homeless youth transitioning out of foster care in partnership with CASA and the Jefferson County Department of Human Services, and 10 units for homeless veterans. The homeless veterans will come via VASH vouchers, which are Veterans Affairs Supported Housing vouchers through the VA. The other 60 units will be a mixture of 30 to 70% AMI, so a good mix of folks in that building. We will have on-site services, including some on-site training. We will have a partnership. We have a partnership with Red Rocks Community College. They'll be providing some scholarships for our youth, and will be helping us provide the on-site training services. We also have Stride as a partner. They will also be involved with on the medical side. So we have a lot of great partners on this property. We have private activity bond cap that's been awarded to us from the city of Golden, the city of Arvada, Jefferson County, and now we're requesting some from you guys as well. It's really, truly a countywide project and really has a lot of great support. I've been very happy with how things have went as far as political support and just support in general from the city of Arvada and the county and everyone with regard to this property. It's amazing how many people have come to support us. So we have that happening. That's the property. We are also, just something to note, one of the things I love about this specific development is we will be using prefab walls that will be built in Golden at a Golden plant. So that was a great benefit to the city of Golden as well when they gave us their private activity bonds. As far as how what we need and all of that, I'm gonna let Amy talk about that. But I did want to just give you a good idea of what the property looks like and who it's going to be serving. Amy, you want to talk about the bond cap and where we're at?
Sure. I'll be really brief, but just wanted to let you know that we do have a bit of a gap for our needs for private activity bond cap to pair with the tax credits that will provide private equity to get this project off the ground. Our current gap is estimated at about $450,000, and that has been driven by pandemic related commodities pricing issues, Lumber pricing is like up like 40% this year. It's absolutely crazy. Drywall, steel, ran into some stormwater detention issues there. So we do have that little bit of the gap of the additional 450,000 in cap that we need to meet the IRS rules for the project, and we would be very grateful if you would support.
Okay, thank you very much. I will open it up to questions from council. Any questions on private activity bonds to support Foothills Regional Housing for a new interesting project in Arvada? Mr. Goff.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thanks. I'll just add that you've heard me say this in the past when we come to you for our 2019 and 2020 private activity bonds, but it's just such a pleasure to be able to find a project locally. You know, the last two allocations were in Wheat Ridge, but this is in Arvada, which is great. It's still serving Jefferson County community. And before that, before 2019, we turned over our private activity bond allocations either to the statewide balance or to CHAFA. You know, the funds went to great use, but these funds are really being kept in our community. And so this is just another great project. And Lori and her team have done such a great job at the Housing Authority that we're excited. I'm excited to be able to recommend that we turn these over to the Housing Authority.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am wondering how many units are going to be for people who are aging out of foster care?
Let me see if I can get this to work. 30.
Oh, 30. Okay, that's great because I don't know. This is the first time I've heard of a program that was specific, like for, you know, kids who get too old to be in foster care anymore, and they're just put out on the street. This is great because this has been a real concern, you know, 18 and they don't know what to do. And also having an affiliation with Red Rocks and scholarships is really a positive thing. Thank you for doing that.
Sure, and we do have some great experience working in this arena. We have a nationally recognized program right now in partnership with CASA and with the county called the FYI, the Foster Youth Initiative, and we are currently housing about 30 youth that have transitioned out of foster care in partnership with both of those organizations, and have been spreading our experience throughout the nation. Zach was involved with that. We had a meeting with HUD and some other officials. So we have some good experience with this. So we feel like this is just a natural fit for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a need. So thank you very much for doing that.
Any further discussion? I'd like to say that I'm really excited. We have a really strong commitment in Jefferson County to work collaboratively between the cities and the county, and I'm really glad to hear that Lakewood and Arvada and Golden and you're coming to Wheat Ridge for a project that really benefits the citizens of all of our communities. So we're a mobile society. But these residents are as much Wheat Ridge residents as if they lived a block or two down the street. So thank you very much for bringing this. Mr. Goff, is this something Mr. Urban, excuse me.
I was just going to make a consensus.
Please proceed.
I'd like to make a consensus that we delegate the private activity bond cap for the city of Wheat Ridge to the Foothills Regional Housing Authority for the year 2021.
All those in favor signify by raising your hand. And it looks like we have consensus on that motion. Is this something that we'll need to bring to council, Mr. Goff?
Yeah, we'll have this next Monday. We'll have it teed up, and it's fairly simple resolution. And yep.
Okay. Yep. Oh, we don't want to see the grass grow under our feet.
Keep it moving.
Too much more snow under our feet right now, but anyway, we'll be seeing the grass soon enough. So, Ms. Rosendahl and Ms. Case, thank you very much for joining us tonight, bringing this forward. We look forward to your great project coming together. Okay, if there's nothing more on agenda item number 2, that will complete our regular agenda, and we will go to staff reports. Mr. Goff.
Nothing. Thank you, Mayor. Nothing major this evening. Just want to give some kudos to our Public Works and Parks staff. They worked all night last night. I think they did, in less than 24 hours after the 4th largest snowstorm in the country, we had dry streets. I understand there might be a few residential streets that still have some snow on it and a little wet, but the sun that came out today obviously helped also. But our staff really did a great job to make sure that the roads were in good shape this morning. So just want to thank them.
Well, thank you very much. And we appreciate all of their good work. We will go to elected officials reports. Is there anyone that has a report for us tonight? And I see that Mr. Miller is on also. So Ms. Nosler-Beck.
Thanks, Mayor. I don't think that Janice is still on. I think she's having some Wi-Fi issues, but Janice, what's that?
I'm sorry, she did drop off. She texted me. She couldn't get back on.
Yeah. But Council Member Hoppy and I are hosting a Wheat Ridge-wide town hall on April 13th at 6 p.m. And the focus of the town hall is going to be lessons learned during COVID and our path forward. And we're going to have Dr. Comstock from Jefferson County Public Health as one of our featured panelists, along with Susan Miller from Jeffco Schools. Karen O'Donnell is going to join us and give us an update on where Parks and Rec are at. And County Treasurer DeTulio is going to join us as well. We are going to do this all on a virtual platform, just on Zoom. And I hope that people can join us. It should be a great conversation. We're asking that folks, if they are interested in submitting questions for our panel of experts to answer, submit those either to Janice or myself. And I want to give a special shout out to Allie. Thanks so much for all your help in putting this together. And we'll start promoting and advertising that on various channels. So thank you so much.
Do you know where citizens might go to sign up for the login or to sign up for the event?
Yeah, that's going to be on the, well, Allie, you might know better than I do, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be on the website. There's going to be a press release that goes out and social media.
Exactly. Well, I turned that over to staff today. Thank you, Councilor Beck, for reviewing all of the sort of draft information. But yeah, it'll be, Mayor, it'll be on our, we'll put it on our calendar. And then just like a council meeting, actually the Zoom information will be there. And then the team will work on flyers, press releases, social media, and a web notification. I think it'll be well attended.
13th at 6 p.m. Thank you so much. Additional elected officials matters. Ms. Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to just express my gratitude for city staff, especially Public Works and Parks and Rec, for just all their good work in the last 24 hours. My neighborhood, we were all out shoveling this morning when the plow came by for the second time, and we had a little impromptu dance party for the plow drivers. They went by. We were very grateful to see them. And I do want to call attention to several of our commercial businesses on our corridors have plowed gigantic mountains of snow onto sidewalks on our commercial corridors. I've seen several places where there are, they're like 6 feet tall mountains of snow that are blocking sidewalks, and those will be there for weeks and weeks. So I don't know, where the city is on that, but I would appreciate some follow-up with some of those, because that really creates a gigantic problem. I appreciate that they're, taking care of their own parking lots, but we then have mountains. So, and thank you to everyone who's been out shoveling. It was like a shovel party in the city today. Everywhere I went, everyone was out shoveling, and I saw the city doing a good job on some of the corridors too. So, so thank you everyone. Be safe, and good work, Wheat Ridge. We set the bar high on that.
Thank you. Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to state that I have received several phone calls and also comments about the neighborhoods being plowed. I always appreciate the plow drivers when they come down, and they were plowing even some streets that usually don't get plowed. So I'm wondering, is this something that we might stand out for when it snows, or is it because city offices were closed today, or why?
Well, our policy, Ms. Hutchinson, is we don't, there's certain streets we don't get to unless it's 12 inches or more. And it's probably been a while since we've had a 12-inch storm, I think, in one day. So we do have priority streets. I sent that out, I think, in an email earlier to you all. So it depends on the amount of snow we get. But yeah, this storm, we tried to get as many streets as possible.
And it was appreciated. So it's the 12 inches that we're kind of going for here.
Yep, or any safety issues that we come across. Yep.
Very appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, additional elected officials reports. Okay, well, looks like we're about to wrap it up tonight in good order. I want to thank everyone for coming. I especially want to thank Representative Duran for joining us tonight, and Megan Dollar with CML leading us through a good discussion on what's happening at the legislature. I want to thank Chief Murtha and his division commanders for joining us tonight and really speaking eloquently about some of the challenges that they face in the public safety realm, and Judge Randall also. It's a pleasure to have all of you and to lead and to have a good discussion on these issues. I think the more that we talk and the more that we understand each other, the better decisions and the better progress we make in our communities. So that will take us to the end of our meeting tonight. We will be back in regular session 1 week from tonight on March the 22nd at 7 o'clock in a virtual meeting for our city council meeting. Until then, please be careful. We've got snow and ice on the roads, but it's moving and decreasing rapidly. So, but we also have children playing and making lots of great snowmen and other things happening. So please be careful out there. Always remember to take care of your personal safety and those of others around you. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting and we'll say good night.